let's cut across to none other than Piyush Goyal speaking at the India Economic Conclave.
With the opportunity. Now, Mr. Goyal, the topic today is about the continuity of reforms. And many people say that continuity takes some sort of a beating when political parties take a bit of a beating at the hustings. But I presume that will not be the case with the NDA. Now, I want to begin by quoting someone from his research paper in 2006 titled The Intriguing Relationship Between Growth and Institutions in India. This man was, until recently, a part of your government. He was the chief economic advisor. His name is Mr. Arvind Subramaniam. In the news, he said, India's founding fathers bequeathed a strong set of institutions, much stronger than for the average country. These institutions have played a key role in the turnaround in India's recent economic performance. Over time, though, it is not obvious that India's public institutions are keeping up with the demands of a rapidly evolving economy. Thus, contrary to the near universal views that the binding constraints to sustain Chinese-style rates of growth are the need to finish the unfinished task of rolling back the frontiers of the state, giving full play to the energies of the private sector, his paper believes that a future for reform agenda should focus equally on strengthening or reversing the decline in public institutions. I'm sure you agree with that statement in totality.
Well, at the outset, thank you, Rahul, and I'm glad that the Times Network has chosen to bring the economy back into focus after all the mudslinging that we saw over the last few days, very often getting politics to overtake good economics. Dr. Arvind Subramaniam is a very learned man and has a very good sense of understanding about long-term economic policy. He gave us very good advice over the last 3.5 years that he was with us. There can be no doubt at all that a nation is defined by the institutions that they create. And I must say the founding fathers of India, and in some sense, some of these institutions even precede our independence, have focused a lot on integrity of institutions, have focused a lot on integrity of individuals who head the institutions. They focus a lot about responsibility and accountability. One can't hope to have power without being responsible to use that power properly and being accountable to the people of India. And therefore, I think while institutions will and always remain important for strengthening India's economic progress and a better future for the people of India, one must certainly also keep in mind that all of us are individuals. All of us in our respective positions have goals, we have certain agendas, but at the end of the day, it's the public interest, it's national interest which will be paramount. And since you started your comments by talking about your desire that this current setback, and I believe you alluded to that,
yes,
this current little setback on the 3 states, hopefully will not derail our huge thrust on reform, our huge thrust to transform the mindset of the nation. I'd like to share with your esteemed audience a particular dialogue that Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, in a recent cabinet meeting, had given to us. We were taking a very major policy decision, which was not a very convenient decision politically. It was certainly not a decision a government getting into election mode would have ever taken.
Is this about Air India?
Well, we've taken a lot of very bold decisions. We are certainly not a government that fights shy of taking inconvenient decisions, but in national interest and public interest. And I remember several members of the cabinet in the meeting were trying to suggest that we can jolly well do this a little later. There's no need to do it right now and then. And maybe it should be deferred. The Prime Minister had only two questions of all of us in his cabinet. A, is the decision good for the people of India? Is the decision in national interest? And if it ticks on both these counts, then now is the time to do it, irrespective of political considerations, irrespective of the timing being linked to an election. And our job as his colleagues in the government is to take that message to the people of India and explain that to the people of India. And I think I can list out countless examples, including demonetization, which at that point of time in November, most people felt that there's an election in March and we would be wiped out in that election, given the inconvenience some people had to face and which was blown somewhat out of proportion also at that point of time. But he had the courage of conviction that he is doing it for the good of India. He's preparing an honest nation. He's preparing a nation to accept that the long-term honesty is going to have a premium. We will have a nation free of corruption. We will have a nation which pays its taxes honestly. And the people of India give him complete support because they trust that he is that one leader who can change the destiny of India.
Well, given the centrality of maintaining the autonomy of institutions to reform and therefore to growth, I want to ask you, because there has been a lot of criticism about your relationships with various autonomous institutions. You should have been strengthening them, is the criticism, but you're weakening them.
You know, by the way, there's a lot of criticism that I read in the Times of India about me and the work that I do. But I think you strengthen me by your criticism. And I'd like to share an example with your group here. I was the Union Power Minister and I was handling the program which Honorable Prime Minister had announced from the Red Fort, that within 1,000 days we'll make sure that electricity reaches every village in the country. And those villages which were left were the remotest and the most difficult to reach out to. And of course that was to a design that if we reach it to every village and then to every hamlet around the villages, that's the only way we can reach it to every individual and every home in the country. After all, we can't have a nation that 70 years after independence still has millions of people starved of electricity or deprived of a basic amenity. And while I was doing the electrification of villages, there was a front page headlined article in the Times of India, criticism, just to reconfirm, which said that there were 3 villages in Rajasthan, which on my mobile app, and you know all my work is given out on mobile apps at the highest degree of transparency. That's been the credo of this government. On my mobile app, it was showing that we've electrified these 3 villages. Now, obviously, the central government takes data from the state, puts it onto the app, and that's how it was showing. When I first read it, my initial reaction was, what the hell, my officers have made a mistake. These villages could not have got electricity because your article had said that these villages don't exist at all. Now, as a person born and brought up in Mumbai, lived all my life in Mumbai, I could never for the life of me imagine a situation where there are revenue villages which don't exist at all. So I immediately dispatched officers to visit these 3 villages. I actually found that because the water table in these villages had gone too low, the people had migrated and there was nobody living in those villages. And therefore, those villages were actually non-existent, thanks to your article. And actually, it was an eye-opener for me. I have publicly felicitated the Times of India and acknowledge the contribution of Times for
But you're
highlighting a subject that I was not aware of.
You're not addressing
1 minute.
my question.
I'm addressing your point only. And looking at that criticism, I was able to find 950 such villages across the country, which on revenue record are shown as villages, were shown as unelectrified villages. If your article hadn't come, I would actually have been funding the electrification of those villages, and you know, in the good old days,
But
this was a
implicit
regular
in your
practice where that
response-
money went, God knows.
Implicit in
We
your
were able to
response-
save that money of the people of India,
Okay.
and therefore criticism
But
and some sort of disagreement is always good.
Very good.
It strengthens relationships and institutions.
But implicit in this example that you have picked is also a tacit admission that there was actually a problem. There was a problem.
Exactly. And if at all anybody in
So-
this room, and even if you think that
So-
we are perfect, then I think we are living in a fool's paradise.
Okay, so we're going to examine the nature of the problem, and let me quote some of your political opponents. The former Finance Minister Chidambaram. He says, the Planning Commission has been shut down. UPSC, UGC, CIC, CEC, and now CVC are in a state of breakdown. The reputation of investigating agencies like the CBI and ED has been irretrievably tarnished. The Income Tax Department has unleashed tax terrorism, and the latest victim is the RBI. Mr. Yechuri, the boss of the left, he comes out and says the BJP is seeking to impose institutional emergency without an official declaration. How do you respond to this?
I can respond to each one of them. I don't know what is the time limit, but I can respond to each one of them and show you how hollow the criticism is that is
So
sought
let's
to be
talk
done.
about the RBI.
Let's first talk about, what was the first name you said?
Well,
First
the-
institution?
the Planning
Shuru kar diya
Commission.
na?
The Planning Commission. was
Planning
shut down.
Commission. Now, the Planning Commission of India was the one which took out the numbers which showed that India will need X amount of power in a few years from the time that they came out with that report. And basis that, thousands and thousands of megawatts of power plants were set up across the country. It was the same Planning Commission. I'm using an example from a ministry that I've run. It was the same Planning Commission which said that India can never increase its coal production. Therefore, all these plants should be built based on imported coal, which will continue to be imported not for 1 year, 2 years, but for 25 years at least after that.